may not have realized it, but you're a primary source now. You witnessed and lived through the inauguration of President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. You are now a primary source. People can come to you and ask you what you were doing that day, how old you were, you lived it, which I think is amazing. So, like 30 years from now, your kids, or even farther than that, your grandkids are going to ask you, what were you doing? How old were you? What did it feel like to watch the first woman of color to become the vice president, which never happened before anyway? So, today we're going to be practicing analyzing primary and secondary sources, primarily primary, so that we can understand more about West Africa during the time period we've been talking about, so we can respond to a DBQ. We haven't done one in a while. But I mean, I think it's really great, especially if you watched it, you are a primary source. And you were watching a primary source because it was live feed from the inauguration. So we're going to go over the do now, and then we have notes and review very quickly. Lots of visuals I wanted to go through, and then we'll practice a little bit, and I'm going to set you free to be on your own. I'm curious to see, and we'll go over things tomorrow, so you want to make sure you answer all the questions in complete sentences, because we're going to go over them tomorrow, and you need to understand these documents to be able to compose or at least outline a DBQ. You'll need the Chromebook, the video, and a quiet space so you can focus. Today is National Hugging Day, so if you need a hug or someone you know needs a hug, make sure you have your mask on, but you give them a hug. All right, so when I say go, we're going to do the do now, and your do now is you're going to set a timer for 1 minute. No cheating. Not 5 minutes, not 2.5 minutes, 1 minute. And you're going to list as many primary and secondary sources as you can in the boxes. Again, no cheating. Don't do Wikipedia, don't do Google, none of that. Just trust your gut and see what you remember. That's why it's a review. Ready, set, go. All right, so just 2 notes today. We're just reviewing primary and secondary source. So a primary source is created at the time of the event. So that's why I said the inauguration was a primary source. You were watching a live feed of what was happening. Now, if you watch the news later, which it's probably going to be live feed all day, but if you watch the news later, you'll still be watching a primary source because that video was taken while the inauguration was happening. So that still makes it a primary source, even though you're watching it after the fact. So we've talked about that with like basketball games. You might see, you can watch a basketball game live or you can watch it later, but it's still technically a primary source because it was being videotaped at that time or recorded. No one does videotapes anymore. But this particular newspaper it's from Evansville, so it's from Indiana, and this is when President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill. And then secondary source is basically one step removed from the original event. So this would be like a history textbook or a book about something, not necessarily an autobiography or anything. Oh man. So here are some more in-depth lists of what you'd be looking for as far as primary and secondary. So they have all these examples, but I really like the bottom where it talks about why it's important and why you should question these types of sources. So why important? You have an eyewitness, a first-hand account of what happened. Now, why should I question a primary source? Does the author have a bias or an agenda? So you've probably seen, well, actually, I'm moving on to secondary source first. A secondary source can often be an interpretation of a primary source. So this would be something like ESPN commentary, like after a game. They're talking about the game. Why it's important is it offers additional insight. And then why question it? Again, they could be misinformed. They could even have they could have a bias as well. Sometimes primary sources, it says why question because of the bias. If you followed Donald Trump's presidency, you often might have heard of CNN versus Fox News. Fox News tended to have a bias for Mr. Trump, and so it's important to question those. What are they taking a side to something? When we watched the World Wars, there were opinions. We had people commentating on actual events, but they'd say so and so was stubborn or blah blah blah, and that's an opinion. So we're gonna read the historical context, and I also have the link to the PDF here. So in case sometimes some of these documents might be a little small for you, and then you can also just like run through it, so it'll just look like a PDF document. But just I'm sorry, my throat. Just want to remind you that this is a task that's based on documents that go with it. I'm so sorry. The task is really just to see your ability to work with historical documents. Can you be given a document, and even if you don't know a lot about it, can you analyze the documents to figure out what it's telling you? So, historical context, Africans had developed advanced civilizations before the Europeans arrived in the 15th and 16th centuries. Beginning with Axum, which is Ethiopia today, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, last week, in East Africa in the 300s, the kingdoms, empires, and cities rose and declined. In West Africa, 3 empires, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, which we spent a lot of time with, controlled the gold and salt trade. Between 1000 and 1500, cities on Africa's east coast also gained wealth and power through trade. There were several centers of advanced civilization in Africa between 300 and 1400. So we know a lot of this information, or maybe you forgot a lot of this information from the past couple weeks, but this just gives you a really quick like background information so you understand as the reader what's going on or what's going to be discussed in the documents. So here we have our first document. Before I even start to analyze the document, I want to know what it is. Is it a speech? Is it a photograph? This case, it's a map. What is the map telling us? What do the lines on the map mean? Well, I go to my key, right? And I look and I see that it says what? Trade routes, right? Okay. So I know that all these lines mean that this is the routes that people traded. And if you aren't sure, what do you think the arrows mean? So there's arrows kind of going in different directions. You're right. So it means that's the direction that items are being traded. So things from Axum were getting traded over to Kush or Nubia. So what we have to do next is read our description. Axum reached its height between 325 and 360. Axum's location made it an important international trading center. This map shows the trade routes to and from Axum between 300 and 700. First thing I always do is if I don't understand what once I've read that, if I don't understand what a word means, I'll look it up, because if you don't know what the words mean, you can't answer the question. So the question for this particular document, document 1, how did Axum's location enable it to become a trading center? So first you need to know, what does enable mean? If you enable something, what does that mean? Allowed it, right? So some people, might describe certain people as like enablers. But how did Axum's location allow it to become a trading center? So I want you to take 1 minute or hit pause, and then I want you to answer this question. Do not forget, you need to have complete sentences. That starts with a capital letter and ends with a period, please. So go ahead and pause. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go in, and you know how this goes. So before I even answer, I'm going to restate. Axum's location allowed it to become a trading center because, and I'm going to go back to my map and I'm going to find Axum, which is right here. Thinking about all the other civilizations we've talked about, Greece, Rome, Arabian Peninsula, which just happens to be right here. What do all of these civilizations have in common as far as location, like Axum? So Axum is in a particular place that makes it become a really great trading center. Think about that, or you should, or hopefully you already did think about that. It's right on the water, so it makes it a really good trade route. Go straight to the water. You can get to Mecca. You can go this way into the Middle East. You can go to the Mediterranean. Because I don't want to say it because that's not scholarly. Became a trading axis because it was located on the coast with access to water. So present that so you can get it. If you did not, you want to make sure your slide for this one looks like my slide, because that way later if you get stuck on how to form or format a sentence, you can just go back to this one and you have a correct version of what that should look like. This one, again, I want to identify what this is. I see quotations, but I'm still not super sure. So I'm looking at where it says document 2. Between 700 and 1067, the kingdom of ancient Ghana rose in power and gained control of the trans-Saharan gold and salt trade. This description of the king's court in ancient Ghana was written by the Arab scholar al-Bakri. So I'm kind of thinking, what is this? I see quotations, it's in italic. So what is it exactly? I see this word description, and I see another keyword here. It says written. So it's not a speech, but it's a text. So it's something that this scholar wrote. The Court of Appeal is held in a domed pavilion around which stand 10 horses with gold embroidered trappings. Behind the king stand 10 pages holding shields and swords decorated with gold, and on his right are the sons of the subordinate kings of the country, all wearing splendid garments and with their hair mixed with gold. The governor of the city sits on the ground before the king, and around him are ministers seated likewise. At the door of the pavilion are dogs, wearing collars of gold and silver, studded with a number of balls of the same metals. First thing you want to do, any words in here that you don't know what they mean, look them up. So one word in particular, like subordinate, might trip you up. Well, I know that insubordinate means I'm not following directions. So if I'm told to do something, if Miss Burkett asks me to do something and I don't do it, I'm being insubordinate. So this is actually the opposite. So if insubordinate is not doing what I'm being told to do, subordinate means they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the sons of the subordinate kings of the country. And then I would just want to look at anything else that I'm confused about. Maybe you don't know what a pavilion is. You're going to look that up. You're not going to look like that. So I don't want to take up too much of your time more with, I don't want a super long video. But there's a couple documents like this where it has 2 questions. So like, what evidence of wealth is described is going to go here. And then what evidence of an advanced political structure is described. So political structure is what? I see the word political and I see structure. Politics has to do with what? Right, government. Structure is how something's laid out. So what evidence of an advanced or strong political structure or government is described? Then as you go through, you have some more documents. Remember to restate. And this is, you might say, we already looked at this map. No, you did not. So you want to look at the key and make sure you are really looking at it. And then what I suggest is I did give you the link to the PDF. I would use that if this is too small for you. So we did a great job today. Please encourage you to, or I do encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm always willing to do a Google Meet. I don't have office hours today, but if you just text me, I can make it work. I want you to make sure you submit your slides and then make sure you use this checklist that we've been working with for quite a bit. If any of your answers don't meet these 3 criteria, you need to go back and fix it so you get full points. And then I have the link for the attendance as well so that you don't forget to fill that out. But welcome to Being Primary Sources. And we will continue to, well, we'll go over all of these tomorrow because I don't want you to read something and have no idea what's going on. So we'll go over it tomorrow, but make sure you get this done. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.